Commander Vexthu stood in the center of the massive council chamber, his dark scales catching the bright lights above. He was huge, nearly 8 feet tall, with thick armor-like skin and sharp claws that could cut through metal. His yellow eyes looked around the room at all the different alien species that had come to meet with the Galactic Council. There were the bug-like hive people with their shiny shells, the rock creatures called stonewalkers who looked like living mountains, and the tall blue beings from the ice worlds. Each group looked strong and dangerous in their own way. They all had natural weapons, thick skin, or special powers that made them tough fighters. Then Vexthu's eyes stopped on the human delegation. He had heard about these new creatures from a small blue planet called Earth, but seeing them in person made him want to laugh out loud. The humans had sent 2 representatives. One was a man named Jinwoo, who wore a simple military uniform. The other was a young woman called Hana Kim. She was tiny compared to everyone else in the room. She barely came up to Vexthu's chest, and she looked so thin and fragile that a strong wind might blow her over. Hana wore plain clothes, just a simple gray suit that looked boring next to all the fancy armor and robes of the other species. Her skin was soft and pink, not hard like scales or shells. She had no claws, no fangs, no spikes or horns. Her arms and legs looked so weak that Vexthu wondered how she could even lift her own body weight. "This is what the humans send us?" Vexthu said in his deep rumbling voice. His words echoed through the big chamber. "A small, weak creature that looks like it would break if I touched it?" The other aliens started to laugh. The Hive Queen made clicking sounds that meant she was amused. The Stonewalkers made deep grinding noises. Even the ice beings, who were usually quiet and serious, seemed to find the humans funny. Vexthu walked closer to Hana, his heavy footsteps making the floor shake. She looked up at him without fear, but also without anger. She just watched him with calm, dark eyes and wrote something down on a small tablet she was holding. "Look at this," Vexthu said, pointing at Hana with one of his clawed fingers. "No natural weapons at all. No armor, no fangs, no poison, no special powers. How did beings this weak even survive long enough to build spaceships?" More laughter filled the chamber. Some aliens started making bets about how long humans would last in the galaxy before they were wiped out by stronger species. "Their bones must be hollow like bird bones," said one of the hive warriors. "And their skin is so thin you can see the blood moving underneath." "They probably eat only soft foods because they have such small teeth," added a Stonewalker. "How do they hunt? How do they fight?" Vexthu nodded in agreement. "They must be prey animals on their homeworld. Maybe they hide in holes or run away when danger comes." Hana kept writing notes, not saying anything back to defend her species. This made Vexthu even more sure that humans were weak and scared. A real warrior would have gotten angry and fought back with words at least. "Perhaps we should find them a good job in our galaxy," Vexthu said with a nasty smile. "Maybe they could be servants or entertainers. They are too weak to be soldiers or explorers." The other council members laughed even harder. Some started suggesting other jobs for humans, cleaning spaceship bathrooms, carrying messages, or being pets for stronger species. Jinwoo, the human military officer, stepped forward like he wanted to say something, but Hana put her hand on his arm to stop him. She whispered something to him that made him step back, even though his face showed he was angry about the insults. "Yes, servants would be perfect," said the Hive Queen. "They could clean our egg chambers. Their small size would let them reach places we cannot." "Or maybe zoo animals," suggested another alien. "Other species would pay to see such strange, weak creatures." Vexthu was enjoying himself now. He had been the supreme commander of the Dominion fleet for many years, and he had conquered dozens of worlds. He knew strength when he saw it, and these humans had none. They would be easy to control and use. "Do you have anything to say for yourself, little human?" he asked Hana directly. Hana looked up at him and spoke in a clear, calm voice. "We came here to learn about other species and to share what we know. We hope to find our place among the stars." This made the aliens laugh even more. The idea that such weak beings could contribute anything useful to galactic civilization seemed ridiculous to them. "What could you possibly teach us?" Vexthu asked. "How to be weak. How to survive without any natural defenses? Hana just smiled, slightly, and wrote something else in her notes. Her calmness in the face of all the mockery was strange to Vexthu. Most weak species would be crying or begging by now, but this human seemed almost interested in what was happening. The council session continued with more insults and laughter directed at the humans. By the end, everyone was sure that humans would be given the lowest rank in galactic society, if they were allowed to survive at all. 3 days after the first meeting, the Galactic Council gathered again in their great hall. This time they had something special planned. Elder Zorak, the oldest member of the council, stood up with an ancient scroll in his hands. "The time has come for the trials of worth," he announced in his deep, wise voice. "Every new species must prove their value to our galaxy. These trials will test your strength, your mind, and your fighting skills." All the alien delegates straightened up with excitement. The trials were famous throughout the galaxy. They decided which species would become leaders, which would be soldiers, and which would serve others. Vexthu's eyes lit up with joy. This was perfect. He could use the trials to show everyone just how weak and useless humans really were. He stood up quickly, his heavy boots making loud sounds on the metal floor. "I volunteer to test the humans myself," he said with a big smile that showed his sharp teeth. "As Supreme Commander of the Dominion Fleet, I will make sure they get a fair evaluation." The other council members nodded in agreement. They all wanted to see what would happen when the tiny humans tried to do trials made for real warriors. Elder Zorak looked at the human delegation. "Do you accept this challenge? You may choose to withdraw and accept a servant role instead." Jinwoo started to step forward, but once again Hana moved first. She walked to the center of the chamber, looking very small among all the giant aliens around her. "Earth accepts the challenge," she said clearly. "I will represent my species in the trials." The chamber went completely silent for a moment. Then suddenly everyone started laughing so hard that some aliens fell off their seats. The idea of this tiny, weak human girl trying to do the warrior trials seemed like the funniest joke they had ever heard. "Surely you are joking," said the Hive Queen, wiping tears from her compound eyes. "These trials were made for real fighters, not for children." "The trials include lifting weights heavier than your entire body," added a stonewalker. "You would be crushed flat in the first minute." Vexthu was laughing so hard his whole body was shaking. "Little human, do you even know what these trials involve? There are tests of raw strength where you must lift massive stones. There are endurance runs through burning deserts and frozen wastelands. There are combat matches against trained killers." Hana nodded calmly. "We understand the risks, but we still want to try." This made Vexthu laugh even harder. He walked over to a control panel and activated the broadcasting system. Bright lights came on, and cameras started recording everything. "Attention all ships and planets in Dominion space," he announced. "You are about to witness something amazing. A weak human thinks she can complete the trials of worth. This will be the most entertaining failure in galactic history." Messages started coming in from all over the galaxy. Aliens were placing bets on how quickly Hana would give up. Most thought she would quit within the first few minutes. Some cruel ones hoped she would get hurt so they could see what human blood looked like. Vexthu rubbed his clawed hands together with excitement. "I will personally design your trial course, little human. I want to make sure it properly tests your capabilities." He walked over to another control panel and started selecting different trial components, but instead of choosing the normal tests, he picked the hardest ones available. He selected the stone lifting challenge meant for creatures 10 times Hana's size. He chose the endurance course that went through 3 different deadly environments. He picked the maze that had confused even the smartest species. "Are you sure about this?" Jinwoo whispered to Hana. "These aliens are not playing fair. They want to see you fail." Hana smiled at him. "I know, but sometimes the best way to change someone's mind is to show them something they never expected to see." Vexthu finished programming the trial course and turned back to face the humans. "Your trial will begin tomorrow at dawn. The entire galaxy will be watching to see how long you last before you give up and beg for mercy." "What happens if she actually completes the trials?" Jinwoo asked. The question made all the aliens laugh again. The idea was so impossible that they had not even thought about it. If she somehow manages to finish, Vexthu said with a nasty grin, then humans will be granted full rights in our galaxy. But when she fails, your species will serve us as slaves forever. Elder Zorak looked worried. Commander Vexthu, perhaps. We should use the standard trial course. What you have chosen seems excessive. Nonsense, Vexthu replied. If humans want to prove they belong with warriors, they should face warrior challenges. Besides, she can quit anytime she wants. No one is forcing her to continue. That night, news of the human trial spread to every corner of the galaxy. Billions of aliens tuned in to watch what they thought would be a quick and amusing failure. Betting pools were set up on every planet. Some aliens even planned parties to celebrate the humans' defeat. In her small quarters, Hana spent the evening studying the trial course layout and preparing her equipment. She did not look scared or worried. Instead, she seemed almost excited about the challenge ahead. Tomorrow would change everything, though nobody except Hana seemed to realize it yet. The morning sun shone brightly on the massive trial arena as billions of aliens across the galaxy watched their screens with excitement. They had all come to see the tiny human girl fail in the most embarrassing way possible. Popcorn-like snacks were being eaten on distant planets as families gathered to watch what they thought would be quick entertainment. Hana stood at the starting line, looking impossibly small next to the huge obstacles ahead of her. She wore simple, workout clothes and carried basic equipment, nothing fancy or high-tech like other species used. The alien crowd in the arena was already laughing and pointing at her. Look how tiny she is next to the first obstacle, one alien said to his friend. She will never even reach the top of that wall. Vexthu sat in his special viewing box, smiling widely as he watched the cameras focus on Hana. Begin whenever. You are ready, little human, he announced through the loudspeakers. The whole galaxy is waiting to see you quit. The first challenge was a massive stone wall that moved and shifted like a living thing. Giant blocks of rock, each weighing several tons, slid back and forth in complex patterns. Other species had always just used their incredible strength to grab the blocks and force them into position, creating a path to climb up. Hana walked up to the wall and stood there for almost a full minute, just watching. The crowd started to get impatient. Is she giving up already? Someone shouted. Maybe she is too scared to even try, laughed another. But Hana was not scared. She was studying. Her human brain was doing something the other species rarely did. She was looking for patterns. After watching for a while, she noticed that the blocks moved in a rhythm, like a giant mechanical dance. Instead of trying to fight against the massive stones, Hana found the pivot points where each block balanced. She used physics and leverage, pushing in just the right spots at just the right times. The blocks that looked impossible to move suddenly became manageable when she worked with their natural motion instead of against it. The crowd slowly stopped laughing as they watched her climb the wall using intelligence instead of strength. Even Vexthu leaned forward in his chair, no longer smiling. Interesting technique, muttered an old stonewalker engineer. I never thought of using the block's own weight against them. The second challenge was an endurance race through 3 different environments: a burning desert, a frozen wasteland, and a poisonous swamp. Most species just powered through using their natural resistance to extreme conditions. Hana approached this differently too. In the desert section, instead of running straight through the burning sand, she studied the shadows and found paths that stayed cooler. In the frozen area, she used her knowledge of how heat moved through materials to stay warm with less energy. In the swamp, she found the safest routes by watching how the local plants grew. What should have been a brutal test of raw endurance became a demonstration of human adaptability and problem-solving. She finished faster than many much stronger species had. How is she doing this? Asked the Hive Queen, her compound eyes focused on the screens. She should have collapsed by now. Humans must be tougher than they look, replied one of her advisors, but even he sounded unsure. The third challenge was a complex puzzle maze that tested intelligence and reasoning ability. Most species approached it using their specialized mental abilities. The Hive people used group thinking. The Stonewalkers used mathematical precision, and the ice beings used logical analysis. Hana's human brain worked differently. Where other species saw the maze as a series of separate problems, she saw it as one big connected system. Her generalist intelligence let her make connections that the more specialized alien minds missed completely. She solved puzzles by thinking about them, in ways that had never occurred to the maze designers. Instead of following the intended solution paths, she found shortcuts and alternatives that were so simple and obvious that other species felt embarrassed for not seeing them. "This is impossible," said one of the council engineers who had helped design the maze. "She is solving these puzzles faster than our computers predicted anyone could." The fourth challenge was a series of combat simulations against robot opponents programmed with the fighting styles of different warrior species. Each robot was designed to be unbeatable by anyone except members of the species it copied. Again, Hana surprised everyone. She did not try to outfight the robots using their own methods. Instead, she studied each opponent quickly and found weaknesses that the programmers had not even known existed. Against the robot programmed with Stonewalker fighting techniques, she used speed and mobility. Against the Hive warrior robot, she disrupted its pattern-based attacks with unpredictable movements. Against each opponent, she adapted her strategy completely. By now, the arena had gone completely quiet. Billions of aliens across the galaxy were staring at their screens in shock. This was not supposed to be happening. The weak little human was not just surviving the trials, she was excelling at them. Vexthu's face had gone from amused to concerned to something approaching fear. His yellow eyes were wide as he watched Hana move through challenges that had defeated species much larger and stronger than her. "Sir," said one of his officers quietly, "perhaps we should stop the trials now, before she reaches the final challenge." "No," Vexthu said, though his voice shook slightly. "Let her come. I will face her myself in personal combat. Then we will see how clever she really is." The morning sun cast long shadows across the village square as Maya stood before the gathered crowd. Her weathered hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to reveal. For weeks she had carried this burden alone, watching the rot spread through their community like poison through water. "I have something to tell you all," Maya began, her voice cutting through the morning air. The villagers who had known her for decades as the quiet keeper of the old mill leaned forward with curiosity and concern. Behind her stood three others: Samuel the blacksmith, Elena the healer, and young Thomas who tended the sheep. They had discovered the truth together piece by painful piece until the full picture became impossible to ignore. "The grain stores are empty," Maya said simply. "They have been for months." A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. How could this be? They had seen the wagons coming and going, heard the mayor's reassurances that all was well. Their children had grown thin, yes, but they had been told it was just a difficult season. The mayor, Marcus, pushed his way to the front. His face had turned the color of ash. "This is nonsense," he stammered. "The woman has lost her mind." But Maya continued, steady as stone. "The wagons you saw were carrying sand and rocks, covered with a thin layer of grain. The real food has been sold to merchants from the north. The money," she paused, meeting Marcus's eyes, "sits in the mayor's personal coffers." The silence that followed was deafening. Parents thought of their hungry children. Farmers remembered their missing harvests. The elderly recalled how their rations had mysteriously decreased. Marcus tried to speak, but Samuel stepped forward. In his massive hands, he held account books, stolen from the mayor's house in the dead of night. "Every transaction is here," the blacksmith said. "Every lie, every theft, every coin." The crowd's shock transformed into something darker. Years of trust shattered in moments. Some wept, others clenched their fists. A few began to move toward Marcus, who backed away slowly. "Wait," Elena called out, her healer's authority commanding attention. "There is more." She explained how the mayor hadn't acted alone. The merchant Dmitri, the tax collector Petros, even the priest Father Constantine, all had taken their share. The conspiracy reached deep, touching nearly every position of power in their small world. Young Thomas, barely 16, spoke last. His voice shook, but his words were clear. I saw them meeting at night. I followed them to the old cave beyond the wheat fields. The grain is there, what's left of it. Enough to last maybe 2 weeks if we're careful. The reckoning that followed was swift but not violent. The villagers were not a brutal people, though their anger burned hot. Marcus and his conspirators were stripped of their positions and possessions. Everything they had stolen was returned to the common stores. But justice was only the beginning. The village faced a harsh reality. Winter was coming, and 2 weeks of grain would not save them. They needed to rebuild everything: their food supplies, their leadership, their trust in one another. Maya found herself elected as the new mayor, though she had never sought such responsibility. Her first act was to send riders to neighboring villages, telling the truth of their situation and asking for help. Pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. The response surprised everyone. Villages they had traded with for generations sent what they could spare. Old debts were forgiven, new alliances were formed. The story of their corruption and redemption spread, becoming a warning to other communities. As autumn deepened, the Q village worked as one. Every able hand helped with a desperate late harvest. Children gathered nuts and berries. The elderly shared knowledge of forgotten food sources, roots that could be eaten, ways to preserve meat without salt, how to make bread from acorns. The conspirators were not exiled but made to work alongside everyone else. Some, like Father Constantine, seemed genuinely broken by remorse. Others, like Marcus, worked in sullen silence. But they worked, watched always by those they had betrayed. By the first snow, the village had gathered enough to survive, though barely. The winter would be hard, harder than any in memory, but they would face it with open eyes and empty hands rather than full bellies built on lies. Maya stood again in the square, now covered in white. The same people gathered, thinner than before, but somehow stronger. We have learned, she said, that the greatest hunger is not in our stomachs but in our hearts, the hunger for truth, for justice, for community. We have fed that hunger. Now we must feed our bodies through the cold months ahead. They dispersed to their homes, each carrying their small portion of food and their large portion of hope. The reckoning had come and gone. What remained was the long, slow work of rebuilding, not just their stores and systems, but their faith in one another. Spring arrived slowly that year, as if nature itself was hesitant to trust again. Maya stood at the edge of the village, watching the first green shoots push through the melting snow. 6 months had passed since the reckoning, 6 months of the hardest winter anyone could remember. She turned at the sound of footsteps. Marcus approached, his once proud bearing now bent with the weight of his shame. He had asked to speak with her privately, away from the watching eyes of the village. Maya, he began, then stopped. Words that had once flowed so easily from his lips now seemed to stick in his throat. Speak freely, Maya said. We are past the time for careful words. Marcus nodded slowly. I need you to understand why I did, not to forgive, I know that's too much to ask. Just to understand. Maya waited. She had learned that silence often brought more truth than questions. My father was mayor before me, Marcus continued, and his father before him. I grew up believing I was special, chosen, different from the others. When the bad harvest started 3 years ago, I panicked. I couldn't be the one who failed where my ancestors had succeeded. He picked up a handful of muddy snow, letting it fall through his fingers. The first time I only took a little extra for my family, just enough to ensure my children wouldn't hunger. But once I started, it became easier. I told myself I deserved it for the burden of leadership. And the others? Maya asked. How did you convince them? I didn't have to convince them much, Marcus said bitterly. Dmitri was already skimming from his scales. Petros had been taking extra taxes for years. I just organized it, made it bigger. We told ourselves we were protecting the village. From panic. If people knew how bad things really were, there would be chaos. Maya studied him, The man who had once walked with such confidence now looked hollow, eaten from within by his choices. "You created the very thing you claimed to prevent," she said. "I know that now." Marcus met her eyes for the first time. "Every night I see the faces of the children who went hungry because of me. I hear the old ones coughing in the cold because they gave their food to others. I understand now what I took from them. Not just grain, but trust, hope, community." A crow called overhead, harsh in the morning quiet. Maya remembered her own temptations during those hard years, moments when she had considered taking just a bit extra from the mill, telling herself no one would know. The difference was, she had chosen otherwise. "Tell me," she said, "what have you learned from working beside those you betrayed?" Marcus's face changed, something like wonder crossing it. "I learned that Widow Anna, who I always thought was weak, gave half her rations to the orphaned twins next door. I learned that young Thomas, who I dismissed as a simple shepherd boy, noticed our crimes when all the adults were blind. I learned that Samuel the blacksmith, who can barely read, understood justice better than I ever did with all my education." He paused, struggling with the next words. "I learned that I had never really seen them. They were just subjects to me, numbers in my ledgers. Now I know their names, their stories, their struggles. I work beside them every day and I see their strength, the real strength I was supposed to protect and serve." Maya felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "And what do you think should happen now?" "I don't seek to regain what I lost," Marcus said quickly. "I know that trust, once broken, is not easily mended. But I want to serve, truly serve. Not from above, but from below. Let me work the fields. Let me clean the stables. Let me do the jobs no one wants. Let my children see their father earn his bread honestly, even if it comes with shame." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun climb higher. In the distance, the village was waking. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the sound of morning work began. Hammering from the forge, the creak of the mill wheel, children's voices, carrying on the wind. "Understanding is not forgiveness," Maya said finally. "But it is a beginning. You will continue to work. You will continue to be watched. But perhaps, in time, you can build something new from the ruins of what you destroyed." Marcus bowed his head. "That is more than I deserve." "Yes," Maya agreed. "It is. But this village has learned that justice without mercy becomes its own kind of cruelty. We will not forget what you did, but we will not let it define who we become." As they walked back to the village together, Maya realized that understanding was perhaps the hardest part of all. It was easier to paint Marcus as a villain, to make him wholly evil in their minds. But the truth was more complex. He was a man who had made terrible choices from ordinary weaknesses. Fear, pride, greed. These lived in every heart. The question was what each person chose to do with them.